Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at the subreddit r/prorevenge. So sit back, relax and enjoy some Reddit stories. Actor picks the wrong sound crew to mess with. Here's another little tale from my days working in the entertainment business. Very early on in my career, I managed to get a gig working as a showman, a person hired in just to work the show, on stage electrics and follow spots on a major West End musical. Even though I was nominally a sound engineer, the chance to work on a big show in, albeit a different capacity, was too good to pass up. When you're a youngster in this industry, you would be daft to turn down such an opportunity, because the experience garnered is invaluable, even if it's not directly related to your primary skill set. We spent about 6 weeks working on the production fit-up. Most of the time I was working on rigging lamps, running cables, installing additional dimmer racks, yada yada. Sometimes I got to help out the sound crew rigging their kit and thus got to know them quite well. Fast forward to a few months after opening night. Some of the electric showmen, myself included, had managed to pick up the occasional extra work assisting the daemon, crew who were permanently hired to the theatre, doing lamp rounds. This is when you go round the entire theatre, front and backstage, replacing burned out lamps, useful extra money. Thus, I happened to be in the theatre well before the half-hour call, and was hanging out with the sound crew at the sound desk. There were 2 of them, we'll call them Pete and Chris. One would run the FOH board for that night's show, while the other one would do other jobs, like handing out the radio mics to the cast at the half, collect them at the end, and troubleshoot any problems during the show. They'd also swap duties every day. So we hear the half called, and Chris goes off backstage with his box of radio mics to hand them out, while I carry on chatting to Pete. About 10 minutes later, we see Chris returning to the FOH desk, looking very distressed. Pete asked him what on earth was wrong. It transpired that the male juvenile lead had absolutely ripped into Chris for some utterly trivial problem to the point where he had been reduced to tears. I should point out that this particular actor was not well liked by the crew because of his arrogant and holier-than-thou attitude. This did seriously not sit well with Pete at all. By this time, the audience was beginning to fill the auditorium and you could hear the ambient chatter level going up. Pete then grabbed his headphones and, parking one earpiece over his right ear, proceeded to punch in the pre-fade listen button for that actor's channel. A grin then crept over his face. He then brought the channel live and slowly raised the channel fader. He handed Chris the cans, and a huge grin also spread across his face. Chris then handed me the cans so I could hear what had amused him so much. I listened in, to be confronted by the sound of the actor right in the middle of taking a full throttle dump. We are talking grunts and groans, and levels of flatulence quite the equal of the trumpets that flattened the walls of Jericho. Bear in mind that this sound is now being leaked out into the auditorium, albeit at a level just barely perceptible to the audience. I glanced around at the punters in the stalls, and saw that quite a few people were looking around quizzically. I had to struggle to rein in my laughter at the delicious payback, but as it was getting close to Act 1 beginners, I had to go off and take my station. So I high-fived my friends and went through the stage pass door to the Electrics crew room, to be confronted by my colleagues falling about in hysterics. It was then that I became aware of a peculiarity with the show relay. For context, the show relay is a microphone front of house, and a bunch of speakers all over the backstage and dressing room areas that allow cast and crew to listen into the progress of a show. Due to a curiosity of its design, what was just barely audible out front was now being hugely magnified backstage. The entire cast and crew, no matter where they were being subjected to the sounds of our actor dropping the kids off at the pool, at practically full volume. For the rest of the show, the hapless idiot had to contend with the entire cast and crew giggling uncontrollably whenever he passed, and all the while remained completely oblivious to the reason why, as the one place there were no show relay speakers was in the toilets. I wonder if anyone ever told him. I feel like this guy just never found out in his life, but people secretly called him behind his back like the toilet guy. Reprisal in the military. I had an illustrious career with the 101st Airborne for around 8 years, and about 5 spent on deployments. Eventually, I came down on orders to leave Campbell, and got shipped to a toxic unit in Germany, where I was nearly the most decorated soldier there. And my time at Campbell had sent deployment stripes almost halfway up my arm. Doctor decides it's time for me to medboard due to some severe deployment related issues, and the unit put crosshairs on my back because I wasn't letting them wipe some dirty stuff under the rug. Here's what happened. I had to file an Article 138 in order to bring an end to this nightmare. The basis for the Article 138 was reprisal for reporting that an E5 had threatened a junior enlisted member with physical force to the MPs after the unit tried to sweep it under the rug. He grabbed the soldier's neck and told him something along the lines of, "If I get any more stuff from you, I'm gonna knock your teeth down your throat." Which in my book is not in any way living up to the values in the NCO's creed, and in no way should our junior soldiers be under this type of leader. I was not having it. It all blew up into a giant mess after they found out, and they immediately went into retaliation mode. Next thing you know, I have Article 15s coming at me from every direction, and eventually a chapter packet. They were going to try and railroad me out of the military, and I wasn't about to let them take my career away because I stood up for a junior enlisted and did what needed to be done. The unit hated me, and the good old boys club fired up its engines to turn everyone they could against me. They ostracized the hell out of me, and the first sergeant started holding formations just to talk about how the unit has some snakes in the grass, and not to worry because we're gonna take care of them, and get them out. All directly but indirectly focused right at me. My first line would ask me questions like, "So, what are you gonna do in the civilian world after we kick you out?" They started making life difficult in as many ways as they could think of. I probably had about 9 or 10 combined hours of standing at parade rest getting provoked in my first line and first sergeant's office. They micromanaged the hell out of me every second of the day to ensure that I was both going crazy and didn't have the time to seek outside assistance. They even stooped as low as to have one of the soldiers who lived in the same German town as I did spying on me. Unit was asking why I left my baby alone to go out and walk my dog. I didn't, my wife just wasn't working that day, unbeknownst to them. He was watching and reporting me as a neighbor. A very dear and very high-ranked friend of mine from Fort Campbell recommended a lawyer out of Washington, D.C., who was a retired JAG and was expertly versed in UCMJ, and he immediately recommended invoking a little-known article in the UCMJ called Article 138, Request for Redress. So I called the lawyer up and hired him immediately. We both went to work, and what we crafted together in the end was a thing of beauty. I realized very quickly that if I didn't head down the path of stopping this immediately, they would lay waste to everything I ever worked towards. So for a while, I just played victim to let the unit step on its own feet. Request to use open door policy, denied. Request to speak to legal services, denied. This actually made me very happy because they had no idea how screwed they were at this point, because this showed that the unit legal rights / policies and regulations didn't matter. I continued letting the unit step on its own tail and logging the evidence as the days went on, at the behest of my lawyer, who was itemizing the formal complaint as things progressed. The funniest part is the unit wanted to know what I was up to, because I was walking around without a care in the world and it showed. So out of the blue one day, info comes down the chain that's a surprise. I can now go to legal if I want, They escorted me there and took me to a specific lawyer, which I thought was strange. And for the biggest mess up of all, they had sent me to the commander's legal counsel, a sneaky move, as soon as I mentioned that I was putting the finishing touches on a massive Article 138. He wanted nothing more to do with me, and said stop. I'm not even supposed to be talking to you. I represent your commander. So after this, tensions are high in the unit. I had recorded every bit of dirt that the unit had under every rug, and one of my favourites was how the commander thought he was some type of technological genius for digitalising all S1 to S6 shop records on Windows SkyDrive, secret documents and all, rosters, contact information for everyone. If it was an S-shop thing, it was there. A huge OBSEC violation. I made sure to include screenshots of my Article 138 that was already right around 4 inches thick. Even though the basis of the Article 138 was reprisal, this was just the icing on the cake. That was just the tip of the illegal activity iceberg, but it was all notated in the Article 138 with times, dates, photographical evidence, witness accounts, the whole 9 yards, all chronologically ordered, collated, and itemized. The final day came when it was time to serve the commander with the Article 138, and he tried to play it off and did one of the worst things you can do to an Article 138. He ignored it. At the end of the 5-day grace period, he had to submit a written response to the complaint. I took the leash off my lawyer. I let my lawyer handle the rest, and he got the Article 138 on every desk of the United States Army of Europe Command before the end of the day. The fallout was a thing of beauty to watch. I got the commander relieved of command, and the first sergeant sent a letter of reprimand for his involvement. Basically a death sentence for an NCO career. My first line supervisor, one of the leaders of this catastrophe, got knocked back down to E5. And the awful E5 that this whole mess was over, I saw on my last day before I transferred out of this unit pulling CQ. As an E4, I had won. It was weird at first. I was a walking legend amongst the unit. What had happened had sent shockwaves across the unit in the form of whispers about what was happening to the command, and I had several people pull me off to the side begging to know what had transpired. Anyways, after Division finished nuking my chain of command, the frivolous Article 15s and chapter packet were dropped, and I got a lateral transfer paperwork from Division to head to WTU, so there wouldn't be any reprisal for what I had done and I could finish my medboard in peace. I'm now 6 years retired. That is some hard karma right there. Like, they completely messed themselves over by trying to mess him up, and it just backfired so hard. Local hero sticks it to City Hall. This happened quite a few years ago. Where my hometown is a thing called ALR, Agriculture Land Reserve. Basically, there are areas of land that can only ever be used for agriculture, in order to protect prime agriculture land from becoming highways and strip malls, and things like that. A friend of a friend, let's call him Fred, had inherited a piece of such land on the outskirts of the city. He had no interest in doing any kind of farming, but the ALR rules allow for the property owner to have a personal residence on the land. So, he built a house on it and had a nice place to live just outside of town. Now, City Hall has ways of acquiring ALR land and using it for non-agriculture purposes. I'm not familiar with how exactly, but they can, and it is almost impossible for anybody else to. One thing the city would do is acquire ALR land and turn it into condo developments. They had a vision for 3 high-end condos to be built where Fred's property was. They had already bought the properties on either side of Fred's land and were going after his too. The city was only offering Fred the property value, and since he just built a house there, he would be losing on the deal, so Fred said no. While the condos on either side of Fred were being constructed, the city used every tool they could to try and expropriate Fred's land, but the ALR restrictions made it tricky. Finally, they told Fred since his land was ALR, he needed to be using it for agriculture within 30 days, or they could take it from him. Fred's response? Pig farm. He crammed as many pigs onto his property that he legally could. Full compliance with farming regulations, health and safety, whole 9 yards. Since he had fulfilled his obligations with the ALR, the city could not touch him, period. The city had already pre-sold a number of these condos, and naturally, none of these buyers were very happy to have spent a small fortune to live next to a big stinky pig farm. Most of the buyers obtained grounds for dismissal on their purchase agreements, while the rest filed a big lawsuit. The city's project was sinking fast. The city started negotiating with Fred, and the story ends with the city finally making Fred an offer for his land that was so ridiculous he had no choice but to accept. The city finished their condo project, but thanks to Fred, they did not make nearly as much off it as they had anticipated. I was just reading the comments of this one and someone said, "Oh, a friend of a friend, let's call him Fred." That's very Dr. Seuss, so this guy wrote a Dr. Seuss poem. I'm gonna read it. Thank you, Suze Frost, for this. A friend of a friend, let's call him Fred, with city council went head to head. In a shady move they tried to steal his land. If it's not a farm, then you'll be banned. So Fred decided, with a little smirk, that he would put his land to work. He bought some pigs and then some more, and then another just to be sure. Because if you want to stink that's big, nothing's worse than the poop of pig. The city council was so mad. "We're losing money," Fred said, "too bad. I followed your rules, my land's a farm. It's not my fault you've come to harm." The council sighed they had been beat, so they gave up, they cried retreat. When they came back with hat in hand, they asked, "Can we please buy your land?" With this request they named a sum that made Fred happy but then quite glum. He took his pigs and the council's cash, new condos went up in a flash. And though the council made some money, I still do think it's kind of funny that by following the rules Fred won the day with his pig stools. That was literally amazing.
Hey everyone, I hope you all had a really good day and that you enjoyed that video. If you want to check out some other videos, then click on screen right now, or check out the playlist down below. If you enjoyed that video, then please do leave a like. And if you want to submit your own stories, then you can do so by joining the Discord in the top link in the description. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon.